Mr. Ben Cross, how are you, dog?
I'm great, Peggy. How you doing today?
I am awesome. So listen, hey, first off, welcome to my show.
Hey,
And
show, I got to tell you, I'm a long-time viewer of the program. You've done tremendous things with it, so kudos to you.
all right, I love it. Now listen, we do have a dress requirement. So I'm so thrilled that as being on my show, you've dressed the part. You look very nice, very dapper. I am going to have to bring you up to speed on Room Raider, though. We'll give you that lesson afterwards. I'd give you about a 10. You're missing a plant, though. You need to have a plant in your background, but the books are quite nice.
I have some faux foliage right here. Maybe I can bring that down. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
And I have to say, I do recognize the service award from Worldwide ERC, my prior employer. So thank you for all your contributions there.
Yeah,
As
and
well.
I got a much better one here that just wouldn't fit because for some reason they want to make the wood bigger on these, but this one's actually the one that I'm really proud of. Yeah,
Yay! I
yeah,
love it.
that's my S right there. But yeah.
Soon you'll be a Hall of Leaders. So that is awesome. So, hey, listen, you know what? I'm excited. I want to welcome everybody that's out there. I'm seeing some great names come across here. Jack Jampel, Cindy Salter, a lot of fun people that are out there. And it's so excited for me to be here and be a part of your program and taking over the mic. So, the good news is actually, Ben, that this is not a talent show because, years ago, it's a funny story, right? We're going to get into the serious stuff, but we got to start with the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Years ago, when I was in choir, I was, believe it or not, yes, at church, and I was in the choir. And years ago, I actually got kicked out of church choir. Is that bad? So you would not want me to be singing.
You got kicked out of church or kicked out of the choir or kicked out of both?
I got kicked out of church later, but I got kicked out of church choir earlier. So that was sort of precursor. But at any rate, hey, listen, super excited to be here. Super excited to see all of our friends. But I want to spend a little bit of time. And the reason that I wanted to be on here is you've done so many great things in the course of the time that I have known you. And so I want to change this up just a little bit and have a chat with you a little bit about, everything that you're doing in Ben 2.0. A lot of people look to you as inspiration. And so I'm going to just sort of sit back here a minute and say, listen, why the change for you and why now?
Well, first of all, I want to go to your kind of what you said before, right? About as long as we know each other and everything. And I got to tell you, I remember when I first came into this business, people asked me how long I've been in the business, right? And I feel like being in the business didn't really start until my first ERC in San Antonio, which I think was 2010. And that's when I felt like I was truly in the business. And I was so enamored with you and the organization and Heidi and just like the vibe. Now, I wasn't like in the in crowd. I was still very much like on the outside, and I was still very much like, the new kid and like, just trying to like make a name for myself in the YP40 circle, but I mean, I was like, this feels good to me. I love this, and so the parties and the learning and all that. And so at that point, that's when I was like, okay, I need to make these my people. I need to make this my home, and I need to really pour myself into this, and that basically started an 8-year me bugging Heidi Hume relentlessly for opportunities, and which leads to these plaques, right? These plaques should be the person that bugs Heidi the most, is what it should say on these plaques. But so anyway, that was kind of like what got me into it, and so I guess I just want to say thank you. Honestly, Peggy, for your inspiration and for making us stand up and clap at 8 o'clock in the morning and putting crazy things like WTF on the slides. I mean, you really gave a lot of us permission to really bring our whole selves to the party.
Well, you know what? Hey, Ben, I appreciate that. And actually, quite frankly, you hit on something here, which is our tribe, right? We are in a tribe here within mobility. And, I think it cannot be unsaid what we mean to each other, particularly during arguably a very difficult time. I loosely joke with a lot of people that this 2020 broke many records for many reasons, one of which could very well end up being the first 18 to 24 month year, right? I think everybody was originally thinking December 31st and January 1st is going to be a whole new dawning, and not quite. It's just
we're all celebrating like, woo, 2021's here. And it's like, wait, we're still locked down. We're still not seeing our family. We're still being, I know. You're right.
So, but I do want to talk, just making a change, So let's talk about that. What's that future for you? What inspired that? I want to hear more about your journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, so what inspired it, and then what was the impetus? I think are kind of two of these, because I've been inspired to do something on my own for a couple of years, and a lot of the brand building on LinkedIn, even before Love and Relo, really I think kind of laid some of the groundwork for creating a brand that was portable, right? And creating a lot of goodwill and a lot of equity in the marketplace, right? A lot of friendships and a lot of relationships. And I've been thinking about, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is funny for someone who's like 38 years old to say, after working in corporate America for 16 years. But I've always saw myself that way. I just didn't know there was any money in it. And so I didn't want to be broke. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't want to be broke more than I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I kept finding companies that pay me decent, so I never became an entrepreneur. And I think the more I got inspired by some of the people I met in the circles we kind of described before, and the more I got to meet, people through Love and Relo, and then just the amazing leaders and entrepreneurs and business leaders in this space, the more I was like, gosh, one, I was like, I want to be like them. And two, I was like, well, if they can do it, so it's like, it's like made it a lot more accessible, And so, and then, I started to also realize, okay, what am I really doing? What is my purpose? Like, we can do anything in this world. Like, we could do anything. There's a million jobs and vocations you could take up. But at the end of the day, like, how are you impacting, your community? How are you impacting individuals? How are you changing the world and making it a better place? And honestly, I felt limited. I felt limited when you are an employee of a company, you're on a team, and ultimately you're not the head coach. You're running the plays as prescribed, and you're doing the best you can, and maybe you add a little flair here and there, and you audible every once in a while. But I mean, ultimately, you're accountable to the rest of the people on the team. And I didn't feel like I felt limited by that, honestly. And I wanted to do something with passion and purpose that I believed in. And that's why I decided that I needed to do something. And I was very fortunate to have clients and people who supported me. Yeah. And the support has been overwhelming. It's honestly, it makes me emotional sometimes to think about it, because I don't think I necessarily deserve it. And I feel like it's a true blessing. And I feel kind of like a debt of gratitude to just the community, to all the people that are watching right now. Thank you so much. Everybody that's tuned in, taking time out of their day. I mean, some of these people are in Europe. They could be like with their families right now. There's probably food on the table. Like, they could be doing other things right now, and they're watching us, right?
And you've got a ton of fans here. I mean, Quigley wants to know if you have openings. So you're already looking to grow from an entrepreneur,
Mike, I got a role perfect for you. It's 2 steps backwards, but it might be a big step forward in the long run. Mike, I love you, man. Thank you.
I know, he's awesome. So tell us just a little bit more about it. Like, what's the name of the company? What are you going to be doing?
All right. So here goes, right, Peggy? So the name of my company is Glomo. And Glomo is a consultancy. It's a company that helps companies, and it helps them in sales, marketing, events, media. Basically, our mission is to help the best kept secrets in global mobility not be the best kept secrets anymore. There's a lot of amazing companies out there that are doing really innovative things, that are solving problems, that are filling needs, and they're not top of mind. And then there's a lot of companies out there that have been very successful for a long time. They're kind of coasting on that reputation that they've built, and they're not innovating, and they're just not moving the needle. And so when I've come to companies in the past, right, I've worked with brands like Pods, 1-800 Pack, right? So I've worked at brands that were the new guy on the block, you know, and those companies needed some zhuzh, you know, and they needed to find their product market fit. They needed to open some doors. They needed to make some introductions. They needed to understand how to present themselves. They needed to understand who their customers were, why they were buying, what they were buying. And so I work with my clients to do that kind of stuff. And I think that the little guy should have the same access to opportunity and to compete as some of the bigger players. So that's what I aspire to do.
Well, you know what? Awesome. I always admire people that make a transition. And I was reading some articles over the weekend around the youth will be making more career transitions and bridging than, what my generation had done, right? And so I always admire hearing those stories and how people sort of get the courage. You've got some great comments from folks in here in the channel talking about you getting the courage to make the change. You got some big fans out there, obviously, cheering you on to be sure you can do that. But I want to go back to something you said, because you had the courage, you did this. So talk a little bit about, what advice would you give to folks in our industry? Quite frankly, many of them who are struggling because of their employer, or they may already have been, unfortunately, sort of furloughed or riffed as a result of this. How would you coach them? Be a mentor. How would you coach them for transition?
Yeah. And you've been talking about the gig economy for a while, right? And you've been talking about gig workers for a while. You've been talking about this for a couple of years, and that also kind of got me thinking, right? And it got me thinking that if, companies want to hire me, but they can't afford me, then what if they pay me half of what I make? And then what if I got 4 companies pay me half, right? And then I can give myself a raise, right? And then I can set my own hours. I can do my own thing. I can live with purpose, right? And make an impact. And so I think that you're going to continue to see gig workers, right? And I think you're going to continue to see companies rethink the employment arrangement, right? Employers, what I found as I started going out and talking to people was one of the objections I got, right, when I was going out and I was prospecting and I was calling my Rolodex. It's like, some people just couldn't wrap their head around not owning the whole me, right? They wanted, like, what do you mean? Like, you're only going to give me, like, X amount of hours a week, or you're only going to, I'm like, yeah, that's all you need. I mean, why own? Like, there's an obsession around owning an employee, right? And being able to put your brand on them and say, this is my person, right? And you'd rather own a B player than get a piece of an A player. And I think that dynamic is really strange. I think we should question it. And I think it's going to be turned on its head as people realize that they can access fractional expertise, right? And you're starting to see like fractional CMOs and fractional CFOs and consultants rising. So I think there's that macro trend at play, right? And you identified that before I heard anybody talking about that. You were talking about that kind of stuff. Maybe I'll put my own spin on it to suit my narrative, but I mean, you were talking about that stuff, gig workers, right? And it's not just Uber car drivers. I mean, they're talking about white collar executives, skilled workers. And then as far as what advice I'll give people out there that are watching, because there's a ton of people out there right now who are super great at what they do. But what's interesting also is, like, you come to a point in your career at a company when you kind of level, right? And you can call it hitting a ceiling, or you can kind of call it just like leveling. And the return on investment from the company decreases because you're not really breaking new ground. You're kind of like managing business that's already there, and kind of, it's kind of legacy. And then there's also the fact that the employee wants to challenge themselves, right? And they want to take on new challenges and conquer new frontiers, right? And so I think it makes sense after a certain time where you reevaluate that relationship and you say, does a different relationship work? And so what I would say to the people out there, my advice is really understand your purpose and your mission, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people that want to make a change are running away from something. They're running away from a bad boss. They're running away from a bad company. They're running away from compensation that's just not what they need anymore. And they think that going somewhere else is going to change the way they feel about those things. And my father-in-law always says, you know, no matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah.
You're still there. And if the problem's in here, then that's a different issue. Right? So first, I'd say evaluate why you're trying to go somewhere. You know, and make sure that it's fulfilling your broader personal strategy. Businesses have strategy. People have strategies too. Right?
Yep.
So make sure it's advancing the ball in that regard. 2, make sure you got your stuff together. Okay? Because, and when I mean your stuff together, I mean money. Okay? That's what I mean. I'm not messing around. I'm going to be specific here. Make sure you got your money together. And so work at your current company for yourself as long as you can. Okay? It didn't feel good to do it. I mean, it felt good cashing the checks, but it didn't really feel good to like feel like you're kind of like, you know, well, do it because you're going to need it, right? Like part of the reason I've been able to like really kind of like launch into this instead of like limp across is because I had so I had a war chest built up, right? And so I'd say start consulting or whatever you're doing and do it as long as you can while also earning an income and getting that health insurance and not paying self-employment tax. And the third thing I'd say is make sure with that money that you get qualified professionals around you in a fractional nature. That means a good CPA, potentially lawyers, but I think they're overrated. Don't shoot me, lawyers, or sue me. And then people like media people. You know, I got an amazing camera and media guy right over here. Actually, Cartier, shout out to you, buddy, who's helping me tell my story. Freelancer.com for logos. I mean, using this gig stuff that goes on right now. So much talent out there to build your team, you know, virtually.
Well, and it calls my friend Chris Roberts, right? You know, and what he's written, I shared it there in the channel. He's like, you know, one of the best experiences I've had, not for everyone, you know, and love the why. It reminds me of our friend Kerwin, right? Who speaks so passionately about Simon Sinek. And he talks about, do you have the book?
Well, this is my man Kerwin right here. Sends me this book right here when I was early in my journey. So shout out to Kerwin, man. I love you, man.
Yeah, no, great. See, Room Writer, good book up there. See, he would read. You know, another one of our friends who's made some transitions, you know, I know you know Terry Head, you know, used to run, you know, and a while back I posted in the channel, but he wrote, you know, transitions can be scary at any age or stage of your career, but don't regret taking that step. You know, I've always lived my life from a philosophy of most any decision you make in your life, the business ones, even to the personal ones, you can do and you can undo. I mean, well, not people enter marriage to get divorced, but there's an avenue for that. You can buy and sell a house, you can join a company, you can leave a company. And I find so many people get incumbent in the weight of feeling as though they aren't liberated enough to make the decision, right? To say, you know what, hey, get out, go out and do it. So my friend, you know, I applaud you for doing this. And it's awesome. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your heroes and who inspires you. You know, there's a great line on CBS that says, you know, if you could have dinner with anybody, past or present, who would it be? Not quite in that lines, but, you know, along those lines. Who are your heroes?
You know what? You're going to make me cry, Peggy. Today's been an emotional day, and this is like the cherry on my emotional Sunday right now. So it's about to get real chocolate syrupy in here. No, I mean, my heroes. My grandmother's the first person that comes to my mind, honestly. You know, not a business person. You know, she's a sharecropper from East Texas. Wow. You know, she grew up in the cotton field since she was a baby, right? She started picking cotton when she was like 4. By the time she was 8, she was picking a man's share of cotton a day, which is 40 back, which is cotton. You know, and so that's where she came from. You know, like flour sacks for underwear, like dirt floor. You know what I mean? And so, like, and then she came up with nothing, but she always found something to give. She always was open. There's some people that have nothing and they have a scarcity mindset. And then there's some people that have nothing that find a way to have an abundance mindset. And I think it was her faith, honestly, in God. But she treated everybody as though they had value, as though they were equal, as though they were children of God as she was. And she was just the most amazing woman I've ever known. And so, I mean, if I had the opportunity to have, you know, dinner with somebody, you know, past or present, it would be her. So she's probably my my biggest hero. I don't know if we were trying to go there. It's kind of personal and everything, but she's the most amazing person.
Well, you know what? There's a great line about typically the 5 people that write on the slate of your life and the 5 events. And you know what? That's awesome. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that personal side for sure. You know, Maya Angelou, who's my absolute favorite poet, you know, has this line, it's not what people said or what they did, it's how they made you feel. And, you know, your grandmother, you know, and sort of the things and the legacy that she passed forward to you, I'm sure she's proud. Very wise.
And legacy, like, I'm sorry, Peggy, but legacy, right? Like, what are we playing for out here, right? Like, going back to, like, we could do whatever job in the world, right? I mean,
yeah,
you know, but what are we playing for, right? We're playing for our families in the now and our legacy in the future. And, like, if we're not keeping an eye, if our personal strategy isn't keeping an eye on that, then I think we're really missing our purpose, you know? And so I've been fortunate to have people put in my life who have shared things like that. I mean, Kerwin, going back to Kerwin, he plays for legacy, right? And like I want to play for that too, right? And I think people who do big things play for legacy in big states like that in their families, which is so funny too. If I can just totally get off on the sidebar, and I appreciate you giving me the floor, Peggy, you know, and actually asking me what I think all the time.
Take the mic next week as well.
This is great. I love this setup right now. Okay, can we just do this all the time? But I mean, I think that I was getting off topic, and now I'm confused. Now I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peggy. Peggy, you got questions? Go ahead.
All right, I didn't mean. We'll pick back up on that. So listen, you know what? I want to flip just a little bit, and we can come back to some of the more personal elements. I mean, look,
Sure.
We have just turned a new year. A lot of people talk about the mobility predictions this year, and I think, you know, there's plenty enough out there for us to read on that. So I want to challenge you a little bit further out and say, you know what? Hey, look out 5 years, Ben. You know, what does mobility look like to you in 5 years from now? What does this industry look like?
You know, that's a scary question, Peggy. I'm a lot less scared today than I was a month ago because I'm steering my own ship right now, and I can be as nimble as I want to be, and I'm not riding on somebody else's jet ski, you know. So I'm a little more excited about that. But I'll tell you what, as a mobility professional, I think it's scary if we are tied to our present way of doing things. I think that one of the reasons a lot of and I come at this all. I tend to come at things from a service provider standpoint, right? So sorry to the corporate people out there, because I'm kind of thinking of this as a business owner and being on the service provider standpoint. But I think that one of the things that was attractive about the global mobility space as a service provider was that it was contractual business, it was repeatable. It was, you could count on it. You could understand. You could go to somebody and say, hey, what are your volumes looking like this year? And they'd say, oh, you're getting 100 moves. Okay, great. I could staff for that, right? Super low cost of entry. You know, you send Ben to ERC, he gets a booth, you know, he wines and dines, and he comes back with 100 moves. I mean, it's pretty much, you know, we know what that is, right? I think it's going to get really fragmented. I think it's going to get really hard to wrap your arms around. I think it's going to get very dominated by consumer behaviors. Because every purchasing manager, every HR manager, everybody out there making decisions across the table from us as service providers is also a consumer. So they spend 16 hours of their day being a consumer, and they spend 8 hours of their day being a global mobility manager. Okay? So their propensity to pursue the Amazon, Netflix, Expedia models is going to outweigh the way we want them to do business with. And I was actually on the phone with Bill Grable the other day, and I was applauding his forward thinking around technological solutions. And he's like, well, it wasn't really, and you know, Bill, right? He's like, it wasn't really forward thinking. It was a overwhelming flash of the obvious. And I was like, okay, you know, it's one way to take a compliment. But I mean, he's right. I mean, it's in our face, and what are we going to do about it? So I think you're looking at gig workers, which you called a couple of years ago. I think, what do those gig workers do? I think they choose to move places. I mean, here I am, a gig worker, choosing voluntary relocation to Texas. Like, what am I thinking? Like, have I not heard that this sucks? Why am I doing it to myself and my family? But this is what we're doing. We're making choices like that, right? And then, so I think one of the interesting opportunities that I'm calling right now for global mobility providers who sit on the other end of the table for me is to become strategic business partners in helping businesses understand where and how to do business overseas, so that they can find tax advantageous places, so that they can find talent advantageous places. Eastern Europe, right, is a hotbed for talent right now. I think Africa is going to become an opportunity. And then so it's like, okay, somebody reads in the Wall Street Journal, we need to be, setting up an office in Africa. And they come in, they talk to the CEO, and they're like, hey, I think we should be in Africa. And he's like, well, how are we going to get to Africa? And then they buzz Global Mobility Manager, and she comes in and says, here's how we get to Africa. Here's how we stand up a business over there. Here's how we become compliant. Here's how we make sure that everybody's payroll, tax, immigration, and everything is set up. And it's going to take us 8 to 12 months, and here's what we need to do. And we're going to reach out to our RMC, who all of a sudden offers a service of standing up businesses overseas for other businesses. I mean, those are the types of services I think we're going to be selling in the future.
Well, let me throw out a question here. Carrie Wiseman has asked, and it sort of picks up a little bit on this theme. She's like, look, she'd been through an acquisition as the seller. Do you see, more M&A activity? And then what effect do you think this is going to have on our industry, good or bad? Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, splendid question, Carrie. I think this affects service providers. I think this affects global mobility managers as well. I think this affects everybody, right? Yeah, yes, there's going to be continued consolidation. It's going to be driven by, private equity, venture capital firms coming in and doing roll-ups, right? Roll-ups where you buy a whole lot of businesses, roll them up into one big business, and then sell it to somebody else who then sometimes does a lot of the same stuff, right? And it's the 1 + 1 + 1 = 5, kind of deal, right? And I think you're going to continue to see that. I think that the space has had some, multinational conglomerates and stuff in the space before, but I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that. I think it's so funny because we sit around and we talk about how there's no money in this business. And then there's all this M&A activity from outside where they come in and say, hey, there's huge growth in relocation. There's huge growth in global mobility. There's huge growth in moving. I personally know venture capital out there buying into moving. And if I can't think of a worse business to be buying into at face value, it's moving. So what do they know that I don't know operating men in trucks for the last 15 years, right? So that makes me think different, right? So there's going to be a ton of M&A activity. The question is, what impact does it have? Well, I think you start to kind of have like monolithic kind of service providers out there that are kind of like, not super amazing. I think it's going to limit innovation. I think there's going to be a huge opportunity, though, for the little guy. The middle person is going to get squeezed. The middle person is going to get squeezed out of the business, in my opinion. The little guy is going to do really well. The big guy is going to do what the big guy does. But the middle person, I don't see them having a home in that eventuality. They have to choose. Am I going to go kind of big? Am I going to go small? Am I going to join ranks with somebody? Or am I going to stay super nimble and technology-based? It'll be interesting, but there will always be a place for the people business in this business.
Well, absolutely. I think there will always be a place for the people business. And I'd also say, Ben, to your point, it's exciting to me with the amount of venture capital that is interested in our industry. I do think that is a very positive sign. I think, to your point, they see things that maybe we don't see. And it is in those paradigm shifts that it's incumbent upon us that have been in here to step out of our comfort zone, right? And to reinvent. There's some great business case studies around, sort of how PayPal got started. A lot of bankers were ignoring the signs because their customers were coming in and saying this, and the bankers ignored the signs. So these 3 or 4 people ended up sort of doing it. And I think sold it to eBay for multi-billion-dollar, right?
Yeah.
You see those all the time. And we've got some great success stories in our own industry of people that have done this. And I actually think the moving side of the business is doing well, because no matter what, let's go back to some of the things you said earlier, gig workers or non-gig workers, people do want to experience something beyond just their own perimeter. And so in order to do that, you do have to sort of, transfer across a border. So I think all that, everything you're saying is super exciting. But I want to, let's talk a little bit about one scary thought maybe with this, Ben, are we at a risk for obsolescence? I mean, I hear some people go, oh, it's the end. We're at the beginning of the end for mobility industry. You've got a great lens. You talk to a number of wonderful people. Are we at risk for obsolescence? Are we going to be like Blockbuster Video?
Well, I mean, how scary do you want to get, Peggy? I mean, you want me to scare people? You want me to terrify people, or you want me to make them defecate themselves and turn off the computer right now? Because I think you can go down a lot of paths. Okay, I mean, the scary thing is, yes, lump sum, in my opinion, is a bit of an existential crisis for the managed relocation industry. I don't see it going away. I think even if they were to repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and bring back the moving expense deduction, I think the genie is out of the bottle to some extent, and we're just kind of clawing at it and trying to put it back in. I don't know if that happens, right? So that's the scary thing. The terrifying thing is that once the size of the pie is big enough and they run out of things to do, Google and Amazon will come in, right, into the business. And then the thing that's going to make people poo their pants is human beings might actually be obsolete in the next 20 years and the machines take over. So just make sure what you're putting on the internet is really nice, smiley stuff, because you're teaching your children, the machines, how to treat you. So just remember that for a moment. So that is my scary, terrifying, and poop your pants scenarios.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've always been somebody that lives on the high side of life. So I tend
to counterbalance me, please. Bring us back in, please.
I just think there's opportunity. We just have to, clarify our vision, get out of our own way, and look for the opportunity. And, the opportunity may not be in the traditional mode that it was. So let's use Blockbuster real quickly, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
People are still consuming content. They're still watching movies. You're just doing it in a new digital on-demand way. Blockbuster had a certain way of doing it. Now this is a content power today, but they didn't start there. Remember, they started with 3 simple words: no late fees, right? And so they started with that, and now what are they opening a ton of studios down in New Mexico? So I think it's incumbent upon our industry to get out of our own way and to allow that innovation to sort of come through, because there is a real, opportunity for that. I want to go to something else though that feeds this industry. It's a great question from Pierre. And he's like, what do we need to do as an industry to attract young talent, right? So we talked about the industry being obsolete. How do we attract talent?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And that is an existential question for the moving business specifically, right? The driver shortage, and it's not just a driver shortage, but it's also a labor shortage, right? But it's an issue, I think, that every business, I mean, gosh, the saying, it's hard to find good people these days, right? Is a saying way older than me, right? So it's been an issue for a long time. I think in our situation, we have an amazing story to tell, talking about opportunity, right? We have an amazing story to tell. I've got a camera guy here in the studio, and he was like, so what do you do again? And I was like, well, we do a little this, we do there's immigration, there's tax, and it all kind of comes together, and then people move around the world. And he's like, wow, that's a really cool industry, and it's like, how are we telling our story? Are we talking about the sweaty guys and the greasy trucks, or are we talking about the glitz and glamour of a jet-setting lifestyle as an expat, and languages and monuments and sightseeing and learning things and being fast-tracked to the head of corporations? And I mean, are we painting that picture, right? So I think it's, how do we tell our story? And we need to recapture our own narrative. The problem is corporations, individual companies, and I say corporations as being generous, I think. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us out there watching this right now are small businesses. And how does a small business get really good at telling its story, right? I mean, that's part of Glomo. That's part of what I'm doing, right, is helping people do that, right? And how do we get really good at telling our story such that when we go to job fairs, or we put an ad in the newspaper, like my day, answer the ad in the newspaper. But how do we tell that story in a way that makes the best and brightest, kids show up, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to do business with us, And so I think we have to do a better job of that. And I don't know that each business is going to be prepared to invest in the branding the employment brand and the marketing needed to really do that they need to, because if they're not telling that story to prospective employees, they're also not telling that story to prospective clients and customers. But my point in saying all that is to say, I think that's where the role of the association also can come into play, because they can kind of aggregate some of that spend and some of that service and make the industry as a whole sexier, you know. And I think it would be neat to see the association take more action.
Yeah, you know what? It is a really interesting time. We've got a couple of comments from folks talking about, hey, are we doing enough, you know, upstream, sort of, you know, the way at the educational level from a university perspective. Talked a little bit about the University of Dallas and some few other programs. You know, I do think, Ben, you know, I want to play out a little bit more about what's our responsibility in our industry to sort of elevate it. I look at us as an industry that helps people, you know, deliver their dreams, right? I mean, and it's, you know,
deliver your dreams.
We're, you know, so many years, 10 or so years ago, we custom built our house, right? And we got to have an intimate relationship with the builder, you know, and we were working with him. And when the project closed, I hand wrote the guy a note. And I said, to you, we're one of 10,000 homes you built in the Seattle area. To us, you're building the future of our dreams, which wasn't about the house. It was about the experience, the Christmases, the Thanksgivings, the meals we would share, right? So to your point about changing the narrative, I think that's so important because, you know, we're not reloading somebody. We're helping them, you know, live their dream, right? And we're an enabler of that. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that ecosystem? So yeah. I think you're going on, right?
I used to, you know, it was funny because in my last job, right, we were recruiting salespeople, right? We just had the hardest time recruiting salespeople, right? And there was an obvious lack of compensation. But the other stuff that was controllable, you know, was like, okay, how are we positioning this job? Is it a sales job? Is it a draw against commission job? Or is this an entree into one of the most exciting careers where if you do well and you apply yourself, you get to go to these really fancy conferences, have a great time, you know, wine and dine clients, meet super cool, interesting, curious people who've lived all over the world, right? Some of the smartest, most interesting people you've ever met. Maybe travel all over the world if you want to go chase business overseas. I mean, what are we selling to 22, 23, 24-year-olds, you know, coming out of college?
So, Ben, you know, believe it or not, my duties as host are not quite close to the end, but we're winding in the back quarter of this. So I want to hit on something because, you know, Tom Brune, my friend Tom Brune, did a nice tee up in here, but I also had this as something, and it really is, you know, I'm going to venture now into, you know, some sensitive areas. Okay.
Love sensitive areas.
Yeah, and you know, one, you have a large platform here with LOVE+RELO, and I think we do collectively have a social responsibility as an industry. So my question is on this area of social responsibility. You know, we sure have been given a lot of richness this year to influence everything from, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to social conscience of, you know, some of the things that we're seeing right now and the political spectrum here, change, you know, all those things where we're seeing employees rise up with a broader voice to their employer. And so, you know, should mobility have a voice in this?
First of all, thank you so much for this question. Second of all, yes, the employer-employee relationship is being totally upended, right? Whereas employers used to dictate to employees and employees would do it, and that was the way it was. It's different now, and employees are dictating the terms, I believe, and will continue to do so for a while. And fortunately, that means that employers have to rethink their stance on things, and they have to rethink their silence on issues, because silence is complicity on these issues. There was a concept of, where's my other?
Oh, I love it. We're back to the bookshelf.
Yeah, going to the bookshelf, right? That's what happens when you go to the bookshelf. Right?
That's what happens when you go to the bookshelf. you know? Oh, hey, everybody out there, we lost Ben. This reminds me of my Microsoft days when Bill Gates
Peggy,
took the
there?
stage.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, when Bill Gates
Peggy,
took the stage.
I can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
That's all right. I can hear you, Ben.
Oh my gosh, and I can't hear a thing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Peggy? Just tell me if you can hear me. Okay, you can hear me? I can't hear you, but that's okay. We're just gonna nod, we're gonna sign. Okay, here's the deal. What I was gonna pull off there was a book called White Fragility, right? It's a book that we did a book club read on, right? And one of the concepts in there I think that was the most enlightening and hit home for me was the concept of white solidarity. And white solidarity is basically when white people don't say anything when stuff's going on, right? When there's some racism going on. By the way, this also applies to sexism. This also applies to gender biases. This also applies to basically any kind of discrimination. When you are in the majority and you don't say something, if something, is being said against a female colleague of yours or someone else. I mean, if you don't say something, then you are practicing solidarity. And in that moment, you are complicit in the problem. Because that person looks around and they say, oh, this must be cool. Everybody else must agree like I agree. And I think there's that's super dangerous. And I think that this platform is amazing because this platform is amazing because I get to do and say what I want. Now I got to live with the consequences, and there's going to be people out there that don't agree with what I'm saying and doing. But that's okay. That's fine. I don't believe that you have to try not to piss people off. I think you have to be real. I think you have to stand by what you say, and I think you have to try to be the person you pretend to be. And I think that's what it's about. So this platform has been incredible because of the things that we've been able to tackle this year. And I've been able to do it because it's an independent voice. It's not owned by a company. It's not sanctioned by an association. It's just me and the community who chooses to be here. And sometimes we don't agree. And sometimes they throw stuff in the comments and we go at it. And but I respect them and I appreciate them being there and going with me on things like doing White Fragility, the book club book, doing Lead Like an Ally on how we can be an ally to women in the workplace. I mean, I think this year has been incredible in the way that we've grown socially as a country, and I just want to continue to keep that going. And Peggy, I can't hear you at all, but I'm gonna try to jimmy my mic a little bit, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, Peggy?
Okay, he's gonna jimmy us mic, and I'll keep going. So, my friend Terry, yes, I totally agree with him jimmying his mic. Apparently, but you know what? I totally agree with you, Terry. Anybody else throw us into the comments as well. It is the inclusive nature of what we do. I have often felt I've been blessed and privileged in my life to have traveled to the most wonderful parts of the world to truly see, how other people live and experience, and that gives you an incredible perspective to entertain ideas beyond your own. And, that's just the richness for me. In fact, I'll tell you, I haven't called out this gentleman. He's thrown a couple of things in the comments, but I couldn't get to him fast enough. But my friend Yao, and he's from Sao Paulo, and I'm sure you know him because he's shouting out to you as well, Ben. And you know what? He's somebody that owns his own immigration firm down there. We've broken bread the couple of times I've been down there. But it is truly getting out of your own bathwater, getting that opportunity. And there's not a better industry than ours that has provided that. I mean, I pinched myself for that exposure and that experience. And I know it's made me a better person. So Ben, I think you can hear me now, but I think, what I would love to see is mobility really step into the voice, not the void, because I think HR is picking up a lot of this around the social construct about things around diversity and equity, things around the social conscious, and being the platform for us to have that conversation. Because you know what, at the end of the day, we service each other, we service humans, right? And, this is a safe environment. Ben, I'm thrilled that you have this platform that's unencumbered, right? So it's just awesome. I mean, I could go on and on this stuff.
And I want to shout out also Minneapolis Relocation Council, because they're doing, I think, the last of the 3-part series on this, where Black professionals are sharing their truth and their experience. And I just think making space for these conversations is what we need to do as allies. And I'm just really, I am honored and excited to be a part of this industry. And I think that we've responded in an admirable way. Obviously, there's a ton of work to do. I'd love to see companies actually buy DE&I and not just talk about it. I give Susan Benavidez a lot of credit for also calling this out and saying, we talk about it because it's kind of cool to talk about right now. But I'd like to see us actually practice it, actually report out on it, and actually kind of and make it something with some teeth and some legs.
Yeah. I think the youth, Ben, that are coming into the older Gen Z, the younger millennials, that their voice is so important, and their stories are so important. And I like how they have changed the construct of publicly traded companies. And, it's really quite interesting. Great things to follow on there. Google's Union, right? Yes. A year ago, Jamie Dimon, who hosts CEO Roundtable for one of the first times in their history, instead of putting shareholder value as one of the top 5 things, on that list was the employee experience and the employee voice. And so, I think that mobility has a voice in this. HR is being called upon. You mentioned earlier the strategic, and moving out of transactional and those things and making it sexy. HR has never been sexier, right? I mean, absolutely never been sexier. And so I love that we've been given this privilege, given this opportunity. And I would say, gosh, let's not squander that away. Right?
Yeah, we're having a moment. Global mobility is having a moment. We did a week on Brexit last week. I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but I think it's like kind of the same vein, where we're having a moment where we did a thing on Brexit last week, and it really came into focus that, to my knowledge, global mobility has never really been on the nightly news. And when Brexit hit, global mobility was front and center, and like, how are we going to get people over there? How are they going to get back over here? What's the tax implication? I mean, it was literally global mobility 101 on the news for almost a year, and maybe still is, and so we're having a moment for sure. How do we capitalize on this?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely awesome. I'm going to encourage people to continue to submit some questions if they have them. But Ben, as we round out our time, I have 2 things. I want to do a lightning round with you. Got a final question as we're looking at the year, but listen, my lightning round. You kind of hit on the first one, but you just got to answer real rapidly here, and then you can give explanation at the end. Are you ready?
Yes.
Full service.
You said lump sum or full service?
Yes.
Full service.
Strategic or tactical?
Strategic.
Return to office, remote work?
Remote work.
Gig worker, FTE?
Gig worker.
Commuter or extended business traveler?
Ooh, extended business traveler.
That's where you're landing? All right. So all these sort of fit this theme of sort of a continued change in our industry. Any comments you want to cover on that at all?
Well, I think, it's extended business traveler brings me back. I didn't know what an extended business traveler was. I remember this going back to me pestering Heidi for opportunities. This is about 3 years ago. This was in DC, right? Whatever the last one was, 4 years ago, at the last ERC in DC, right? And Heidi texts me and she says, "Ben, what are you doing?" I was like, "I just landed. I'm at the bar," which is a typical conversation at ERC, right? Just landed at the bar. And she's like, "Come to the Virginia room right away." I'm like, "All right." I don't ask questions. I just do it, right? And so I just show up to the Virginia room, and I'm actually doing a Jeopardy skit with Bill Grable and Sue Carey in honor of Dale Collins, and Sue Carey's line was extended business traveler, or maybe that was my line. I forget. And I think Ryan Wetruba was Alex Trebek in that. But point being was, I didn't even know what an extended business traveler was 4 years ago, and so I've had a lot of fun learning about this industry, and I really appreciate the people have welcomed me, knowing that I didn't know, and knowing that I was just curious to learn, and I hope believing that I had good intentions, even though sometimes I put my foot.
So let me give you a fun fact. If you're ever going to play a game of Trivial Pursuit, put Dale Collins on your team. Whether or not you knew it, he qualified for Jeopardy. So fun fact there. Seriously.
That's probably why we did the Jeopardy skit, was because he was.
Oh yeah, he qualified for Jeopardy. I want to give a shout out to my friend Dory. Dory, I love you. I haven't seen you since I was up in Canada. You know what? She was one of the ladies that I had a chat with at one of the last CERC events I attended live. And we talked, both of us, so passionately about, you know, diversity and inclusion. So she's doing some fantastic things up there north of the border. But hey, Ben, it truly is almost the end of my time here. And I've been, you know, honored and privileged for you giving me the opportunity to still make. I do have a closing question for you, though.
Yeah.
We've had, you know, great banter on a variety of topics, but you know what? February is a month for love, right? So I want to know about your first Valentine.
My first Valentine. Okay. I don't remember. Okay, so my first memory of Valentines were those little hearts that tasted like crap that had messages on them, right? Like kiss me, be mine. Didn't say kiss me because kids would give them up. It was like be mine or whatever, right? And then you get these like 20 packs or 30 packs, these little cardboard cards, and you could like write to Maria from Ben, and you fill out a bunch of these, and you go to school, and you hand everybody a little baggie with a little thing, and everybody got one, or whatever, right? So it wasn't like, hey, you know, would you be my, you know, Valentine? But I remember my first girlfriend, right? This lasted a week, but I consummated the relationship with a Twix.
Oh, wait.
A Twix bar. Yeah.
Okay.
I was the second. I know you thought I was going somewhere with that, right? No. This is very clean. This was in second grade, and her name was Christy Comrie, and she was the hottest thing in second grade. And I asked her. I called her at a moment of weakness and said, "Would you go out with me?" And she was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Sweet." And then I think I called her because we had a list of everybody's phone number, which is not creepy, right? And then I called her when I got home. Like, hey, by the way, I'm going to CVS. I don't know why I went to CVS all the time. I'm like, going to CVS. What kind of candy bar you like? She's like, Twix bar. I wouldn't bought her a Twix bar. I brought it the next day, and I think she broke up with me like 2 days later. But that was my.
You know why? You know why she did that, Ben? You didn't get her the giant king size Twix bar.
It's not it. I was on a budget. Okay, I'm in second grade. I was 7 years old. I couldn't afford the king size.
There you go, my friend. Listen, hey, another nice comment from our good friend Ryan Wotrover. You had mentioned him earlier. Ryan's a lovely gentleman. He's somebody that I just think is another one of those that's making a lot of moves in the industry. So super fun to be here, my friend. Listen, to everybody out there that, you know, followed up and, you know, was participated today. Thank you. From my heartfelt, I cannot wait. Speaking of month of love and my heart, I can't wait to be back out in the field. And I'm giving up the elbows. I'll put on a mask and I'll throw out a whole lot of hugs. But I miss you all. I love you all. Ben, thank you, my friend. Be well, be safe. Congratulations on Glomo. Peace out.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Thanks for doing this with me. It's been a real honor. Thanks, everybody that watched. Hit that like button. Give Peggy a virtual round of applause and show her some love in the comments, okay? It's been too long. Peggy, you got to come back on soon.
There you go. All right. Take care, friend. We'll talk soon.
Take care. Bye.
Right.